number 10, we have the Walton family. Imagine getting into a car accident that leaves you injured for the rest of your life, and then getting a settlement so you can live and survive with said injury, and then having that money being taken away from you from the place that you work at. Yeah, sounds like an awful thing for a multi-million-dollar company like Walmart to do, but guess what? That's exactly what the Walton family did to Deborah Schenck. Sam Walton and his brother began Walmart in 1962, and though it's a great place to shop for Easter chocolate and TVs, it's not a great place to work. Sam and his brother designed the company in such a way that essentially employees weren't essential and they're just commodities for the company to own. Not, I don't know, people. So Deborah Schenck was a shelf stalker at Walmart, and she suffered a severe head injury that had left her brain damaged when she was hit by a semi-truck in the 2000s. Fortunately, she reached a $700,000 settlement with the trucking company involved, and after legal fees, it was around $417,000 left to help support her through her life. But then Walmart was like, wait a minute, we'll take that. Lee Scott, the CEO at the time, decided to enforce the healthcare policy set down by Sam and his family. They sued her for the $470,000 they spent on her medical care, and the court ruled in their favor, essentially leaving her without any support. A clause in the healthcare program states that Walmart is allowed to recoup any medical expenses if their employee receives a settlement. Yeah. Just let that settle in. Fortunately though, the people called out Lee Scott and Walmart, vilified Walmart, and at the risk of losing the company, they allowed Deborah, who was forever changed by a tragic accident, to keep the money. What are we supposed to say, Walmart? Good job? Coming in at number 9, we have Bernie Madoff and the Ponzi scheme. Now, you've probably heard of pyramid schemes at some point in your life. Get rich quick by selling this lipstick or that frying pan and get other people to sell with you so you make money. But you don't really. What makes these schemes so scary is how seductive they are in convincing people to follow them. In reality, these schemes are only designed to make one person rich, which is, of course, the guy at the top of the pyramid. The guy at the top of the pyramid who convinced hundreds of people to do all the work for them. Imagine that. Now for investments. The Ponzi scheme was a fraudulent investing scam with a similar idea. It promised high rates of return with little risk for investors and used new investor funds to pay the backers. The man who executed this plan was named Bernard Lawrence Madoff, an American financier whose fraudulent scheme took tens of billions of dollars out of thousands of investors. By depositing client funds into an account, he used that money to pay other clients who wanted to cash out and just kept attracting new investors to keep funds up. He did this under the guise of a real strategy called split strike conversion for 17 years until the crash of 2008, where he couldn't sustain it anymore. He finally confided in his sons what he had been doing, and his sons were like, "Dad, what the heck?" and turned him in the next day. That's a lot. In 2009, 71-year-old Bernie confessed to 11 federal felony counts: security fraud, wire fraud, mail fraud, perjury, and money laundering, adding up to a 150-year sentence. Now, as far as evil geniuses go, that's a sentence to be proud of, but imagine if Bernie had used his intellect for good. So many people could have been so rich right now. That would have been great. Next up at number 8, we have greed personified. If you guessed Jeff Bezos, you're right. Jeff Bezos is the genius behind the most convenient and irresistible shopping outlet in the world, Amazon.com. You can still get things during COVID on time, which just goes to show how efficient it is and actually how well executed it is. And Jeff Bezos is the man behind it all. This guy has a net worth of $163 billion and is the richest man in America. His only contribution to charity has been $2 billion. I mean, that's a lot. But in relation to his net worth, that equates to around $1,200 for the average family to give to charity in a year. Yeah, that's not nothing either. But I'll admit, Jeff is a multi-billionaire. If you earned $1 a second, it would take you 31.5 years to earn $1 billion. $1 a second for 31.5 million years. Oh, that's some perspective. Other billionaires like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, who, by the way, who together make up Bezos' fortune, have started foundations on their wealth and continue to make donations of around like $30 billion at a time. They, among others, have also signed the Giving Pledge, which is an honest promise to donate the majority of their extreme wealth to charity, because I don't know, what would you do with like that much money? Look, who am I to say what you should do with your money, okay? That's fine. So let's name other reasons why he's on this list. 1, he makes his employees pay taxes to him. 2, he lowered their wages. 3. He doesn't give bathroom breaks, so they have to get inventive. He attacks small book publishers. He also has a maniacal laugh. The list goes on. Did I mention he also looks like Lex Luthor? Yeah. Number 7, Lawrence Bittaker, aka the Toolbox Killer. Like many others on this list, a lot of potential to do good here, especially with an IQ of 138. But as this list kind of proves, just because your IQ sets high expectations doesn't mean you'll meet them. Bittaker was a high school dropout and turned to a life of crime early on. Bittaker, along with his accomplice Roy Norris, drove around in a blacked out van called the Murder Mac. The two met while serving a sentence at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo after both had developed a liking for crime. Somehow the two made parole, and for 3 months in 1979 they did awful things to 5 women using hand tools. What they did to those poor women inside their van is enough to churn the bile in your stomach, so I won't go into much detail. A psychologist's analysis of Bittaker was that he was borderline psychotic, and Norris had a severe schizoid personality. The two were finally caught, with Norris receiving life in prison and Bittaker died on death row at the age of 79. Number 6, Jeffrey Dahmer. Jeffrey Dahmer. We all know he was gonna be on this. I want to be clear about something. Having a high IQ is dependent on a lot of things. Education, nutrition, environment, etc. It doesn't necessarily mean you're dumb or smart or that you won't or will be successful. Somehow, the same man who drilled holes into humans' heads to turn them into zombies had an IQ of 145. So put that together. Dahmer became known as the Milwaukee Cannibal and is one of the most prolific serial killers to ever exist. He became fixated on animals at a young age. We know what happens after that, right? In 1978, Dahmer dropped out of business school due to alcohol abuse after just 3 months. He enlisted in the US Army to train as a medical specialist, but that didn't last long. He was discharged after he attacked 2 fellow soldiers. After that, Dahmer's mental health deteriorated even further, and he fell hard into alcoholism and began his killing spree. After one of his victims escaped and notified the police, when they got there, the chief medical examiner remarked, and I quote, "It was more like dismantling someone's museum than an actual crime scene." Between 1971 and 1999, he killed 17 men in a variety of gruesome ways and celebrated each one with like trophies. Dahmer was killed behind bars by another inmate in 1994, and that is the end of his story. Number 5, Marcel Petiot. As if the war crimes of World War II weren't bad enough, Marcel Petiot had to add his villainy to the list. Marcel's life started out pretty rough, and due to his addiction to thievery was committed to an asylum. But instead of going to the asylum, he ended up earning his medical degree while interning. Sadly, he didn't use his intellect for good. Instead, he made an already horrific time even worse. Many Jewish people were trying to escape Europe for obvious reasons, and Marcel made sure many did not. He would tell his victims that he had a way out, a route to escape occupied France beneath the eyes of the German army. He claimed he was a part of the French resistance, gathering trust from many desperate souls, but when they fell prey to his plan, he would inject them quickly with cyanide and steal all of their valuables. Luckily, he was eventually captured and executed at the end of the war in 1946, but by then the damage had been done. Number 4, Ed Kemp. Funnily enough, I think this is only the second time I've actually mentioned Ed Kemper in a video, which is very surprising because he's Ed Kemp. Ed's strange talent for making people believe he was a gentle giant, all while committing 10 of the most gruesome crimes astounds me. With an IQ of 145, he easily manipulated his victims into trusting him before it was the last thing they ever did. Standing at 6'9" and weighing 250 pounds, he used both brawn and brains to overpower the women he killed. He showed obvious signs of a pathological need to kill from a young age, starting with the family cat all the way to killing his paternal grandparents at age 15. Even then, he was able to convince mental health professionals to let him go early because he was fine. Wow. From 1972 to 1973, Ed used the line, "I don't have all day," to convince hitchhikers to enter his car, implying he was in a rush, put pressure on them, and convinced them that he didn't have time to kill them. They also never caught him. He turned himself in. If you're still with us right now, remember to like and subscribe, and remember to head on over to Bumblebee to show some love as well. Number 3, Mao Zedong. It surprises me to no end that while I was in high school, we spent all of our time learning about Rudolf Mittler, but this guy totally slipped under the radar. I know the phrase pick your battles exists, but did no one think to pick this fight? Am I missing something? Let me know in the comments. Admittedly, the world probably couldn't handle it after the 85 million people who were lost in World War II, but from 1966 to 1976, Mao Zedong killed over 65 million of his own people in a vicious attempt to establish socialism. From mass starvation to burying 46,000 scholars alive, to flat out killing anyone who got in his way, he was vicious, brutal, and inhumane. His disastrous policies and revisions led to 50% of most villages dying from starvation. As his plans continued to fail, he developed the Red Army, a force composed of girls and boys from the ages 14 to 21 to roam cities and target enemies of the state, especially their teachers. Educated people, after all, are the biggest threat to poor leadership. They whisper ideas. So he would make them wear dunce hats, cover their faces with ink, and make them crawl on all fours and bark like dogs. Let's also not forget his expanded system of 1,000 forced labor camps. Need I say more? Number 2. Shiro Ishii. Talk about Dr. Evil. During World War II, Japanese prisoner of war camps were worse than hell could ever be on Earth. One of the reasons why was because of Dr. Shiro Ishii. He excelled in school and was even called a genius time and time and again. However, instead of using his mind for good, he became a monster. Shiro Ishii was the director of Unit 731 in the Department of Biological Weapons for the Imperial Japanese Army. Ishii dedicated most of his life to understanding the deadliest kinds of science, from disease warfare and inhumane experiments. He did it all to help Japan become the leader of the world. He would perform horrendous experiments on prisoners of war in their encampments, infecting them with diseases and testing out biological weapons on them. His unit even performed live vivisections on prisoners, inflicting them with hypothermia, frostbite, induced strokes, and heart attacks. He was never punished for his crimes and ended up avoiding prosecution for his crimes by turning his experiments over to the US. That's how he got out of it. They were like, you know what? We won't punish you if you give us the results. Number 1, Joseph Stalin. Need I say more? Need I really say more? Now, the world was just reeling from battling dollar store Charlie Chaplin for 5 years, who definitely was a man who needed to be stopped. But Stalin's forces did start out as an Axis power in World War II, but they eventually turned to our side and helped us out a great deal. But that doesn't, nor should it, diminish the fact that during his 30-year reign, he was responsible for the deaths of over 60 million people, 20 million of them being his own. That means he killed roughly 40,000 people per week during his reign. The closest we came to war with Stalin was the Cold War, a nuclear standoff between the US. His place on this list is a little controversial. After all, his dedication as a leader is one of the reasons Mustache Man bit the dust and World War II ended. But due to his murderous tendencies and paranoia, those in the grip of his iron fist would describe him as both a powerful leader, a genius, and a monster.
Starting off this countdown, we have the gas-resistant stroller. When you go out for a walk with the little guys right now, you might throw them in a stroller. It's probably the easiest way to get from A to B without having to wait for the little kids to catch up. They always want to stop and pick up a rock that's smooth. Like, what is it with smooth rocks that seem so cool? Anyways, back in the day when there was a concern about chemical attacks, a gas-resistant stroller was made. The gas-resistant stroller was what looks like a metal coffin on wheels. It was all the rage when mustard gas wasn't yet a war crime. It would pair nicely with a gas mask that your mom could wear as she pushed you through the streets. Honestly, it's pretty terrifying, not gonna lie. I'm glad that this isn't a thing anymore. Over to you, Rachel.
Coming in at number 9, the Fliz. You know that one of the safest parts about riding a bike is the fact that you can get into any sort of accident and you're not attached to it. You can kind of just fly off and jump off before you land in a mud puddle or scrape your knee or whatever. Another great part of a bike is that it has pedals and gears, so you can move much faster than if you were running or walking, which is kind of the idea. Even if you're out of shape and you haven't done a lot of cardio, like the people who get up at 4 a.m. and go for runs, oh my god, those people are like on another tier, they're like gods. Then you can definitely go really fast on a bike if you want to. And what on earth is a Fliz? This thing is what happens when you mix a jolly jumper with a bike and are willing to look embarrassing for everyone to see. The Fliz is a bike with no pedals, so you have to push with your feet like a Flintstone. And now this obviously sucks because you wouldn't really be able to move very fast at all. They also built a harness into it so you can hang in there like you're some sort of baby Bjorn. Usually when you invent a new thing, the goal is to try and make it better than the last version of said thing, instead of making it worse or really stupid. So I don't think the guy who strolls in on the fliz is going to have a swarm of men or women around them being like, oh my god, marry me, I love you, because they look so sexy. They'll probably be looking at him being like, what? Is he okay? And how do you go uphill with this thing? You have to just run up the hill as you're attached to a bike? What is the point of being in the bike then?
In our 8th spot, we have bat bombs. Yeah, not bath bombs, bat bombs. This next one is not only terrifying, but also deadly. When it comes to warfare, people can get pretty inventive. Imagine you're stalking past enemy lines in the dead of night, when all of a sudden, a web-winged furry creature swoops in and drops a bomb right at your feet. Bat bombs were an experimental weapon developed in World War II, and they are exactly as they sound. It was a bat with a bomb attached to it. This would detonate on or near enemies. The plan was developed and submitted by Lytle S. Adams, a dentist from Irwin, Pennsylvania. He presented his idea to the White House just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor, and they liked it and the project was greenlit. The doc assembled an oddball team, including a pilot turned actor, an ex-gangster, and an ex-hotel manager. The project was disbanded in 1943 because it was surpassed by a deadlier project. Stay tuned for that one later on in the list.
At number 7, we have Albert Bandura. Bandura is a famous psychologist who, interestingly enough, just passed away days ago in California. He is famous for being one of the first scientists to discover that learning occurs both through beliefs and through social modeling, which then led to the social cognitive theory. One of his most famous experiments he ever conducted was back in 1961 and was titled the Bobo doll experiment. In this experiment, Bandura hired researchers to physically and verbally abuse a clown-faced inflatable toy in front of many preschool-aged children, which, when the adult researchers left and the children were left alone with the already beat-up doll, the children took on the attitudes of the adults and began yelling and beating up the doll as well. This was later to prove the theory that children were indeed influenced by the violence in media and helped prove his later social cognitive theory. The theory that a person's environment, cognition, and behavior all interact to determine how that person functions, as opposed to one of those factors playing a dominant role. Teaching kids to be future bullies in the schoolyard? Pure monkey see evil, pure monkey do evil. At number 6, we have Craney Landis. Landis was a graduate student at Minnesota University back in 1924. He asked his other graduate students to assist him in conducting an experiment in understanding if we humans all react similarly in different emotions. So, he painted specific lines on each individual's face and then got them to react to certain stimuli. At first, the experiment was harmless. He would record each of their faces as they listened to music, smell ammonia, read passages from the Bible, tell a lie, little things like that. But seeing no real results, he decided to up the ante. He then showed them pornographic images, then some horrendous photos of skin conditions, firing random gunshots to frighten his test subjects, getting them to stick their hand in a pail of slimy live frogs that had a live wire in the bottom, so when they touched the live wire, they would get an electric shock. Finally, the worst one of them all, decapitating a rat. He finally put a live rat in one hand and a knife in the other hand, and the test subject was then demanded to cut off the animal's head. If they refused, then he would do it in front of them. Sounds pretty scarring, if I do say so myself. Some started crying, others laughed in disbelief, and others got angry and swore at him. 2/3 ended up carrying out the dark death sentence, and the worst part of it all was that Landis even used a 13-year-old boy, who was actually a patient at the university. His findings in the end proved nothing and were quite different patient to patient. In the end, he just seemed like an evil madman scientist. Coming in at our halfway point at number 5, we have Johann Conrad Dippel. This scientist was born in Castle Frankenstein back in 1673, so it is only fitting that he was a mad and evil scientist. Dippel was a theologian, alchemist, and scientist who developed a popular dye called Prussian blue, and it's actually still used to this very day, which is very cool, but he is also known for the most controversial of things, such as mixing animal bones and hides together in a stew he named Dippel's Oil. Real original. He claimed that whoever drank this gross oil would then have an extended life, but he never said how long either, so I mean, Whatever, dude. He loved dissecting animal bodies, and many believed he frequently dug up and stole human bodies and conducted weird experiments on them in his laboratory. Needless to say, this guy is one of the main inspirations for Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But to the best of our knowledge, he never had the same luck as Dr. Frankenstein in the book. I'm guessing he tried to give that magical animal elixir to the corpses to see if he could bring them back to life, but sorry pal, no liquid on earth can do that. And oh, by the way, Miss Johnson would like her husband back and her cat. At number 4, we have Duncan McDougall. McDougall was born in 1866 in Glasgow, Scotland, and later moved to Haverhill, Massachusetts. One of his most famous experiments he conducted was the 21 grams experiment, where he placed a dying patient on a cot that was on a scale and weighed the patient before and after the moment of death. His findings? That immediately after death, the deceased weighed 21 grams less, meaning that the soul was indeed a physical part to a human's body and that it did indeed leave once a person passed away. The work was absolutely destroyed in the scientific community, but defended in the religious community, as they deemed this was proof of a soul in a person's body. But what makes this guy evil? Well, he conducted the exact same experiment with dogs and noticed no weight change at all. He then made the statement that dogs don't have souls. Dogs don't have souls? You don't have a soul, you jerk! You say one more wrong thing about me, mutt, and I'll shove your pipes right up your kilt. Starting us off in our top 3, at number 3, we have Louis Julian West. For anyone out there that loves animals just as much as they love their fellow humans, this one is a scary one for you. West was quite the controversial scientist and researcher with ties to the top secret CIA project called Project MK Ultra. It was a project that used many US citizens, some of them even unwittingly, to use LSD and other drugs to see if these substances would have any mind control effects. West's studies are also believed to have major repercussions, such as a murder of a young victim, as well as the death of a full-grown elephant. The reason he felt the need to experiment on elephants, though, West knew that male elephants experienced fits, so he believed that he could induce an elephant rage with LSD. He gave the giant creature enough LSD to dose 3,000 people, and tragically, the elephant died. It was then that West concluded that elephants were sensitive to LSD. Yeah, do you think? For many reasons, this guy seems like an evil scientist. From human and animals' deaths related to the overdose of LSD, I think it's safe to say that we don't want to get anywhere near this guy. At number 2, we have Sidney Gottlieb. Sidney Gottlieb was the one who headed Project MK Ultra and worked closely with West in our number 3 spot. Gottlieb was tasked with testing LSD in interrogation settings, but he didn't just test his work in interrogation settings or even in a lab. He actually brought his studies to the bar, where he would slip LSD into unsuspecting bar patrons' drinks. I don't think we need to question how unethical or wrong this one is, as it is clearly something that is messed up and sometimes still happens today, unfortunately. But this video is titled Evil Scientists in History Who Went Mad, and I think this is a pretty good proof that this guy was off his freaking rocker. And finally, coming in at our number 1 spot is most definitely the most evil scientist of them all. This is Josef Mengele. Josef was one of the most famous scientists at the most horrific concentration camp of World War II. A member of the Third Reich, Josef was a camp doctor. He was known to be one of the doctors to select the poor people who were to be sent to the gas chambers, and even went as far as volunteering for more and more shifts when he could. He also conducted many torturous and inhumane experiments on prisoners of all ages. After the war, Josef escaped to Argentina and was never captured by the authorities. He did, however, drown in 1979 in Brazil. While many on this list were half-jokingly evil and gone mad, I think anyone who takes pleasure in sending large numbers of people to their doom is most definitely evil, and I think mad just goes hand in hand with this one.
Number 10, H.H. Holmes. I had a feeling that if I didn't include him at least once, somebody would be like, "You're wrong!" So here he is. Ah yes, the genius inspired by Sherlock Holmes himself, though he ended up being the villain of the story and far from the hero. Henry Howard Holmes was indeed a genius. He skipped a ton of grades, finished school at just 16, and gained a doctorate of medicine at just 23. What was I doing at 23? I was in acting school. But he had a desire for the dark side he just could not shake. His interest in medicine began with practicing on animals. In medical school, he was already dabbling in darkness when he started conning insurance claims and stealing corpses. But for Holmes, everything was building towards his one goal in life, the construction of the murder castle. By 1800 Chicago, Holmes eventually earned enough money to construct a massive labyrinth within a hotel of sorts. It had stores on the bottom and apartments above, each level booby trapped with trapdoors, mazes, hoses and chutes that would drop his victims into a basement with like vats of acid and crematoriums where it was just like nuts. Historians still debate how many people he killed, but they're thinking around 200. Wish they caught him before this happened, but alas, here he is on this list. Number 9, Andrew Cunanan, the man who shot Gianni Versace. Andrew had an IQ of 147, memorized a whole set of encyclopedias by the time he was 10 years old, and by the time he was 21, he could speak 7 languages. So, where did it go wrong? There is no clear reason, but whatever it was, Andrew loved to lie about it. He was a prolific liar and made large claims about his family's origins, to the delight of the rich older men who indulged him. He craved a lavish, carefree lifestyle, which rich millionaire Norman Blanchard gave him until he had enough sense to throw him out. This was a massive blow to Andrew's ego, and this led to a downward spiral which claimed the lives of 5 people. His ex-best friend Jeffrey Trail, his former lover David Madsen, Lee Miglin, William Reese, and then lastly Gianni Versace on July 15th, 1997. There are a lot of missing pieces in this case. Due to Andrew's disillusionment and the passion for lying, no one really knows why these murders happened, or even if he really knew Gianni before he shot him. By the time authorities caught up with him, Andrew had taken his own life, and there was no note left behind. So whatever the reason for his killing spree, perhaps even Andrew didn't even know the truth by the end. Number 8, John Christie. John Christie had so much potential, with an IQ of 128, and he was incredibly gifted in mathematics. Who knows what good he could have done for the world, but during the 1940s to the 1950s, Christie stole the lives of 8 women including his wife, and how he did it is stomach churning. He preyed on the desperate lives of women seeking help and posed as a backstreet abortionist. He would first knock them out with gas, but they would never wake up. When they passed out, he strangled them before or after doing other unmentionable things to them. He stashed the bodies underneath the floorboards, in the garden, or in the kitchen alcove. These horrors took place at 10 Rillington, Notting Hill, London, and the house has since been demolished. But one of the most awful things he did was frame the husband of a family who moved in above him. Christie killed his wife and their daughter, and then set the husband up as the killer. The man, Timothy Evans, was forced into giving a false confession and was hung, and it was this miscarriage of justice that led to the suspension of capital punishment.
Moving on to number 7, we have the apparatus for producing ozone. It's as if Tesla was psychic and knew that in the future we would have serious issues with our ozone layer. Why? Because he had a patent for an apparatus that would produce ozone. The apparatus would force air between a pair of electrically charged plates to trigger a reaction. Because if you didn't know, ozone is created by combining oxygen with electricity. I did not know that. You learn something new every day. Anyways, back then Tesla was concerned about the smoke evil, like the burning of coal polluting the air and causing illnesses. So he thought that if people used this device in their homes, it could purify the air. Well, here's the thing. Ozone in the upper atmosphere protects us from the sun's UV rays. But in our living room, it could seriously harm us. So I'm glad this invention didn't go through as well.
Number 6, the Wardenclyffe Tower. Though the tower was actually built, it was dismantled in 1917 after it was abandoned by Tesla years earlier. Tesla was a big dreamer and needed even bigger funding backing him in order for any of his ideas to be realized, which he got. The Wardenclyffe was a project backed by financier J.P. Morgan, who gave Tesla 150 grand to build this massive mushroom-shaped tower. It was supposed to be capable of transmitting messages and images to ships at sea across the Atlantic, but Tesla had an even bigger idea: wireless energy. He believed that he could use radio and microwaves to light up New York by transmitting millions of electricity through the air. However, this idea, should it have been successful, would have crippled other energy sectors that JP Morgan had his little fingers in, so he refused to fund Tesla any further. So Tesla sadly abandoned his project in 1907.
We're now at our 5th and halfway mark with the remote-controlled boats. In 1898, Tesla participated in an electrical exposition at Madison Square Garden. While there, Tesla presented the idea of a remote-controlled boat, using a wireless command post, so basically like a controller. He used this device to change the boat's direction, and people were like, "Whoa, what the hell is going on? He's a wizard, he's using magic, how is he controlling it?" He was so far ahead of his time that he even created an anti-hacking mechanism so that no one could get control of the boat. Now, he tried to sell this idea to the US Navy. He pitched it saying that they could have pilotless submarines or torpedoes, but they weren't interested. Honestly, he was a brilliant inventor. His inventions were just way too advanced for his time. Now, here's the thing that makes this invention mysterious and spooky. Tesla had other plans for this invention. He didn't truly want to make remote-controlled boats. No. He wanted to warm people up to the idea of robots. More on this shortly.
Number 4, an artificial tidal wave. This next invention was designed to move the seas, if it ever set sail in the first place. Tesla wanted to use physics to prevent war and believed he could harness the power using the sea. In 1907, New York World reported Tesla's new military innovation, which again was supposed to be using wireless telegraphy. The machine was designed to trigger explosions within the sea that would create massive tidal waves big enough to capsize enemy fleets. The purpose would be to make the navies of enemy countries useless. But the invention never came to fruition, but it certainly foreshadowed another detonation device that would bring a world war to an end. Any guesses as to what that might be?
And at number 3, we have the humanoid robots. Now remember the whole robot thing I just teased about? Well, Tesla wanted to invent humanoid robots. He wanted to develop a race of robots or mechanical men that would do all the hard work for us. At the same convention in 1898, Tesla showed off part of his robot invention. He asked audience members to ask this device mathematical questions. The device would solve the questions and provide the answer by blinking the lights on its antenna an appropriate number of times. He was really pushing for this automation, like having things move and think on its own without an operator. Not only was he hoping to make humanoid robots, but also wanted to use these devices to control organs or to create self-driving vehicles, etc. He pitched his idea to the military, to the US government, and to Great Britain, but no one picked up on it. Again, kind of good because we don't need a race of robots wiping out the human race.
Coming in at number 2, we have the electric-powered supersonic airship. Who doesn't dream of leaping into the air and flying? Tesla was no exception to this, and from a young age was fascinated with flight. It was only a matter of time before he came up with his own idea of how to get around the world. When the Wardenclyffe failed, he turned his eyes to the sky. Using his knowledge of electrical and mechanical engineering, he dreamed up a supersonic airship. He first discussed his ideas in July 1919 in Reconstruction magazine, in which he described a craft that could travel 8 miles above the earth, aiming for passengers to travel from New York City to London in 3 hours. He was yet still obsessed with the idea of wireless electricity and believed the craft could be powered by it, meaning they didn't need fuel. Tesla still had never given up on the power plant aspect of the Wardenclyffe and believed if enough were built around the world, their power supply would be unlimited. We have gotten pretty close to realizing Tesla's dream with kinds of crafts we have today, like the ones that were flying over our building today. But Tesla never realized the dream himself.
And in our number 1 spot today, we have the UFOs. Did you know that Tesla came up with a UFO spacecraft that looked an awful lot like the ones we see in alien movies? In fact, people believe that he was in contact with aliens and they told him how to invent this craft. In 1928, Tesla created a patent called the world's first flying saucer. Not only would it defy gravity, but it would have been the fastest aircraft out there even to this day had they successfully created it. So the UFO resembled both a helicopter and an airplane component-wise. There were no wings or propellers, giving it that UFO spacecraft vibe. Had it been created, it would have changed the world of aviation forever. When Tesla built an experimental station, he said he picked up some strange signals from space. He believed these signals were from aliens and that they provided him with a code that translated to 1, 2, 3, 4. He believes they sent out a code in numbers because numbers are universal. So could it be that he actually did make contact with aliens and then they provided him with instructions on how to build this craft, or what?
Starting us off at number 10, we have Giovanni Aldini. Aldini is one of the many scientists who is actually the inspiration for the infamous Mary Shelley novel, Frankenstein. Aldini was a 19th century physicist obsessed with the effects of electrocution. Who isn't, am I right? Anyway, he was a bit of a celebrity and he was known to travel throughout Europe demonstrating the powers of electricity. What makes this guy evil though? Well, he was one of the first scientists to use electrical shocks on mental patients. He also enjoyed electrocuting corpses. One of his most famous acts involved him displaying a body of a hanged criminal and then shocking the body to then make the muscles contract and spasm as if the deceased was still alive. I get it. Electricity is cool, but how about a little respect for the dead? Aldini was also highly respected at the time. The Emperor of Austria even made him a Knight of the Iron Crown. Ooh, sounds evil, doesn't it? At number 9, we have Hwang Woo-suk. Hwang is famously known for his work creating human stem cell lines using cloned embryos from patients suffering from spinal cord injury. This major accomplishment promised an endless supply of stem cells genetically matched to patients, but it turned out to be all lies. Hwang admitted in 2006 that he was indeed falsifying data, but still claiming that he had the ability to do what he was lying about all along. The court found Hwang guilty of buying human eggs in violation of the country's bioethics laws and embezzling 830 million won, which is equivalent to $700,000 of government money. He was sentenced to 2 years in a Korean prison. He received such a light sentence because the judge admired Hwang's dedication to Korean biotechnology. Many other Korean scientists in the community are not ready to welcome him back though, after embezzling so much money on what is supposed to be a great and worthy cause. One Korean researcher states that it is truly tragic because he is clearly one talented experimentalist. Yeah, that's a lot of money. Pretty hard to just trust someone with government and public money after a stunt like that, but hey, I hope there's some scientific breakthrough soon. At number 8, we have Jose Delgado. Back in the 1960s at Yale University, Professor Jose Delgado was working on some pretty scary stuff. Delgado invented one of the first ever brain chips. He was known to use these chips in bulls, monkeys, and humans. It is reported that he once stopped a charging bull in its tracks after pressing a button that activated the small chip inside the animal's head. With the touch of a button, these radio waves could make these animals snarl, growl, smile, invoke lust, hunger, and many more responses. Delgado recently described himself as a libertarian and pacifist whose goal as a scientist was to liberate us from our biology and especially mental illnesses and aggression. I don't know about that. It sounds a lot more to me like he was trying to take over the world with some pretty crazy mind control chips, but he was also known to test on mental patients. Whether this one is with good intentions or not, this one freaks the hell out of me.
Alrighty, here we go. We're gearing up, boys. We're coming in at number 7. This next evil genius has an IQ of 167 and pulled off one of the most notorious bombing sprees in history. After entering Harvard when he was no older than 15, completed his PhD in mathematics at 25, and even became the youngest employed professor at the University of California. Yeah, so needless to say, this guy, a genius. Like, what a promising start. His potential knew no bounds, and yet guess what he decided to do with it. Your first hint is the fact that he's even on this list to begin with. So, between 1978 and 1975, Ted Kaczynski was responsible for the bombings of scientific universities, airlines, and small businesses. He targeted them because he believed they were responsible for the over-industrialization of society and the destruction of nature. So he loved nature. You see, teaching at a university was too much for Kaczynski, so he retired to a cabin in the woods with the desire to live off the land and learn how to be sustainable, thus sparking his passion to protect nature and the deadly protests that followed. Despite his genius, he wasn't very good at constructing effective detonations, which was a good thing in a way, as many more lives could have been taken had he been actually good at it. Over 17 years, Ted sent 16 bombs, killed 3 people, and wounded 23 people, and was sentenced to 8 life terms when the FBI finally caught up with him. Coming in at number 6, this next guy is likely to hit home with a bunch of people considering what's going on right now. I know all of us, including me, are begging for our vaccine appointments. Imagine if someone decided to take a life-saving vaccine, buy it, and raise the price to make it just out of reach of all the people who need it. I introduce you to the pure scum that is Martin Shkreli. Martin Shkreli is the creator and founder of Turing Pharmaceuticals, and his company acquired the 62-year-old medicine called Daraprim in 2015. Daraprim is used to treat a life-threatening parasitic disease and prevents toxoplasmosis in patients with HIV, malaria, cancer, anyone basically with a lower immune system. So pretty damn important. Overnight, Shkreli made the price rise from $13.50 to $750, making it unattainable to many who needed it. A 5,000% increase overnight. Despite the fact it only costs around $1 to make, Shkreli's argument for the increase was that he wanted to use the money to invest in creating a new and better drug. Yeah. Sure, dude. Prior to pharmaceuticals, Martin became a hedge fund manager by the time he was 17. Yes. He also skipped a couple grades. Yeah, I guess he's a genius. Ooh. In his 20s, he caught some attention for encouraging food and drug companies not to approve the drugs he was shorting in the market. So, for those of you who know about GameStop, this is the kind of guy they were trying to teach a lesson to. The price of the drug still remains the same today, and Martin is now in prison for fraud. Good. Coming in at number 5. So this next one isn't necessarily one evil person, it's actually an entire evil family. If you've watched all the good documentaries out there, then you've probably heard of the opioid crisis with the Sackler family involved and the name Purdue Pharma. The Sacklers are known as one of America's richest families, though the source of their approximate $13 billion net worth is cloudy, to say the least. The family runs a private company called Purdue Pharma, which is based in Connecticut. It developed a very familiar and terrifying drug called Oxycontin. Yeah, you know where this is going. Oxycontin contains oxycodone, a relative to heroin and 2 times more powerful than morphine. But what a breakthrough! It was hailed as a medical miracle, a revolutionary painkiller, and shoveled in around $35 billion for Purdue Pharma, despite the fact it's derived from one of the most addictive and deadly narcotics in the world. In 1996, Purdue decided to launch a marketing campaign to shatter this image. Narcotics aren't bad, opioid addiction is exaggerated, Oxycontin is safe, don't worry. Their catchphrase was that Oxycontin was the drug to start with and to stay with, and many did all the way to their grave. Since 1999, 200,000 people have died due to an Oxycontin overdose. Yeah, sounds really safe. But everybody trusted the Purdue Pharma, especially considering all the philanthropic campaigns the Sacklers ran and how generous they are. There's just simply too much to unpack about the Sackler family. There's so much to talk about and I don't have time. The way they balance a mask of generosity on top of sinister dealings is a whole new kind of evil genius. Coming in at number 4, we have Pablo Escobar. Because, well, Pablo Escobar. Just kidding, I'll tell you why. If you haven't already binged Narcos, then I'll give you some insight. Pablo Escobar controlled the Medellin cartel and went on to control the distribution of 80% of the cocaine sold in the US and redefine the narcotics trade. At one point, he needed to buy $2,500 worth of rubber bands a month just so he could keep stacking all the cash that he had, and hopefully he just bathed in it. At one time, he made nearly $20 million a day. Needless to say, when it came to business, he was a genius and accumulated a net worth of $25 billion. He was even mentioned in Forbes. He made sure his product was pure and high quality. He knew how to identify potential markets. He united his competitors for his benefit. He created his own distribution routes, all while maintaining a squeaky clean image as Colombia's Robin Hood. He rose from the ghettos of Bogota only to make himself a living legend that even benevolent financiers can admire, to a point. He did sell cocaine and kill a lot of people after all. A highly addictive, destructive, and illegal narcotic. Once again, there is so much to say about Pablo Escobar. His shrewd business maneuvers, his charm, his intelligence, all woven between his malicious and deadly endeavors. Man, did this guy make a good villain. All right, we're about to come up to our top 3 evil geniuses. If you like this video so far, give us a like and a subscribe, and leave comments down below because we love that too. And we'll just keep giving more of what you want, I guess. Coming in at number 3, we have Henry Howard Holmes. No relation to Sherlock Holmes, though he did admire the guy and changed his last name so he could emulate him in some way. Sadly, this man isn't fictional though. If he was, I'm sure Sherlock Holmes would have relished to take this guy down. This man was pure evil, paired with an excellent mind. If you think Jack the Ripper was bad, just wait. Holmes was another grade skipper, finishing high school when he was just 16 and earning his doctorate in medicine and surgery by the age of 23. On top of that, he was drop-dead gorgeous, blonde, blue eyes, charming, and could dazzle anyone into doing what he wanted. He could have been a great doctor, but doctor and evil go too well together, and he would soon be known for the Castle of Murder or the Murder Castle, whatever one you want. You know the film Saw? Yeah. After working at a pharmacy for years and swindling money, he finally raised enough money to build his Castle of Terror. It was essentially a massive labyrinth disguised as shops on the bottom and little apartments on the top in 1800s Chicago. Each level was booby-trapped with trapdoors, disorienting mazes, and chutes that would drop its victims right into the basement. But you didn't want to be in the basement because what awaited you there was vats of acid, quicklime used for decaying corpses, and a crematorium where he would you know. He also took out insurance policies on his victims to fund his macabre endeavors. Historians still debate how many people he killed, but currently the number sits around 200 people. Coming in at number 2, Jim Jones. I apologize ahead of time if you didn't want to think about Jim Jones today or learn about Jim Jones today, but you clicked on this video, so I guess we're here now, so. Ever heard the phrase, don't drink the Kool-Aid? Well, if you hadn't, you will now. Jim Jones was the self-proclaimed messiah of the People's Temple cult in a San Francisco-based evangelist group in the 1970s. He is responsible for the Jonestown massacre, which resulted in the mass suicide of 900 people. In 1978, this guy manipulated 900 people to drink cyanide-laced Kool-Aid or fruit punch, whatever you want to call it. He adopted the name The Prophet and became obsessed with power, convincing hundreds of people to follow him all the way to Guyana to set up a commune. He confiscated their passports, millions of dollars, and even threatened his followers with blackmail, beatings, and death. He also staged rehearsals for the mass, which eventually became a live performance. Okay, it's one thing to do awful, evil things yourself, but the fact that he was able to convince so many people to do one thing without question makes him one of the most evil geniuses to ever exist. Speaking of people doing evil things without questioning it, last but not least, we have Josef Mengele. One of the most horrendous periods in history, so bad we can't even say the leader of this group's name on YouTube, which I think is really weird. He's not Voldemort. In World War II Germany, evil bred evil, and yes, there was the leader, but there were many who were responsible for some of the worst acts in history, just beneath him. Josef Mengele is one such person. Remember how I said evil and doctor goes so well together? Well, this guy takes the cake. Again, he could have saved lives, but instead, he destroyed them en masse. Josef ran a program in Auschwitz-Birkenau that focused on the inhumane experimentation on sets of twins. I can't even stomach to even say the things he did. They were so horrendous, so I won't go into too much detail. For Mengele, the experiments were all about eugenics. Eugenics is the practice of improving humanity by eliminating whatever traits they deem are undesirable. He would experiment on each twin by introducing disease, injuries, disfigurements, all under the guise of helping the endurance of humankind. He was also known as the Angel of Death of the brutal selection of prisoners who went to their deaths in gas chambers. He was seen as a genius and indispensable to the advancement of the Aryan race, but the horrors he inflicted will haunt the world for generations to come. I can't think of a worse reason to be the number one of anything.
Visible Pain Ray. This is part of the Pentagon's official weapons program designed to deter advancing troops by heating the skin of the enemy through microwaves. It burns your skin at 130 degrees and gives you an intolerable burning sensation, forcing you to flee, dubbed the goodbye effect. Although they claim it's only used in a non-lethal context, reports have shown it burns over 50% of your skin, with second or third degree burns that cover 20% of your body, being life-threatening.
Holy, oh my god, it microwaves you? No thank you, I agree, that should absolutely be deleted. Delete, Control, Alt, Delete, get out. Ooh, it microwaves you? That's horrifying. That's horrifying.
Schizophrenic robot. Scientists at the University of Texas have created an artificial intelligence computer that can simulate mental illnesses. They applied the theory of hyperlearning to the computer so that it memorizes too many unnecessary details and overloads, the result of which displays disturbing results. One time, this robot claimed to have set off a terrorist bomb since it accidentally mixed up a terrorist story with its own memory. In another, it referred to itself in third person because it couldn't figure out why it was a robot.
Why? That's my only question is, why? Why did we do that? Is that... What? What? You guys, again, from the first one to the fourth one, we are just giving the robots ammo for when they turn against us. That's crazy. Yeah, what is the point of that? And also, what kind of things are you showing this poor robot? I feel kind of bad for the robots.
It's like some sort of scientific measuring tool, doesn't it? Well, that's not too far off. This device was created to help makeup artists see all the asymmetries, unevenness, and so-called flaws of a model's face. With the help of the beauty micrometer, makeup artists would know which features should be enhanced and which should be reduced with the help of makeup. Seems like a great idea, right? Not really. This device, in fact, fixed tons of metal screws and straps to a woman's head and could require up to 325 adjustments. Obviously, it wasn't always a comfortable procedure since the makeup artist could accidentally press the model's head with these strips too tightly.
Yeah, and also not to mention, how about you just use your eyeballs to look at me? How about you just look at my face? I feel like you'll be able to figure out what needs to be enhanced. What do you mean? That is horrifying. That literally looks like a torture device and not like it's used for beauty. Beauty is pain after all. That's awful. Like, imagine it's your wedding day and you're so excited to get your makeup done. You don't normally splurge on those kinds of things. And then they bring in a medieval torture device. You'd be like, why did I pay for this? Anyway.
Tired, or maybe hungover, a good face mask always saves the day. In 1947, there was a similar type of beauty savior, a mask with different plastic tubes filled with ice-cold water. Its original purpose was to freshen up a model's face during fashion shows while not ruining her makeup. But a bit later, people started using the mask as a way to refresh their faces after parties, hence the name. Not a bad idea, right? After all, ice cubes have always been great at removing puffiness after a long night of drinking.
That one wasn't scary. It looks kind of horrifying, but that wasn't too scary. That was okay. Just get like something cold. I feel like this looks like it takes a lot more work than just like something cold, or like getting one of those roller things and sticking it in the freezer for a while. But yeah, this one, okay. No one was getting microwaved, no robots are revolting, nobody's getting poked in their eye. So out of all the ones, this one's been okay so far. I would give this one a shot. The other ones, stay far, far away.
Coming in number 7, we have the Urban Baby Window Cage. I can definitely see how this is appealing. Like, you want to make sure your baby gets a lot of fresh air, but you don't have time to take them for a walk when they're young. The Urban Window Baby Cage was basically a chain link cage with a pillow inside of it. So you could just plop your baby inside and go, look, a bird. Jimmy. Apparently everyone back then would have been totally fine with Michael Jackson dangling his baby outside his window because that's what they all did, apparently. The purpose of this contraption was so that your baby could get a little fresh air, because you don't want your baby to get all stuffy in your New York apartment that's the size of a shoebox. And this was in a time when elevators were both scarce and the chance of them killing you was much higher. Think Tower of Terror, but real life. So walking that potentially very chubby baby up and down 30 flights of stairs doesn't seem very fun as just hanging him outside a window so you can feel the sun in his face and hear all the slurs that New York construction workers offered to the patrons on the sidewalks. If your kid ever gets out of line, you can just throw them in the cage for a timeout. You know? That's, this is why we should forget this. It's not a good idea, guys. Let's just stick with like jolly jumpers and cribs that are inside. That sounds like a better idea.
In our 6th spot, we have the hydrogen blimps. Hydrogen blimps are labeled as one of the worst inventions of all time. Basically, it was like a big balloon in the sky. It would be pushed by propellers, and guess what they would put into the balloon to make it float? Hydrogen. Hydrogen was cheaper and more readily available, so they used it. Just there's one tiny issue with that. It was highly flammable. But they would pile people into this blimp that was fueled by hydrogen. And sadly, they would explode. In 1937, the Hindenburg, a German airship, caught fire and crashed in 36 seconds. It was very sad and very disastrous. But that wasn't even the first time that one exploded. Just after the Hindenburg, that's when people were like, "Okay, maybe this isn't safe." Now, history should never be forgotten. But maybe let's just never bring back hydrogen blimps, okay?
Coming in at number 5, we have plastic. I acknowledge that plastic has helped us get this far. It has been an important part of our development as a species. But just like when a young adult who has to shed their trauma that made them funny, but keep the funny, it's time for us to move on from the thing that is choking our planet. Like, if you go outside right now and get a box of tea, the tea will come in a box that is wrapped in plastic. The box is already a container for the tea. Why are we double wrapping it, you know? I know the purpose is to increase the shelf life, but maybe we shouldn't be keeping things on shelves that long. Maybe? I don't know. We should seek out healthier food that doesn't last as long because it doesn't have as many preservatives. Thus, it would be stupid to wrap it in plastic. Just wrap it in paper. Or pour it into my hands. I don't know, just do it. Or have no packaging and everyone just goes to bulk barns and puts it in glass jars and everything like that. I think that's a pretty good idea, but you know, who knows. The plastic, it lasts a little too long. Let's just say that.
In our fourth spot, we have the brazen bull. This is one of history's most horrific inventions. The brazen bull was a torture device used in ancient Greece around 560 BC. A seaside colony called Ocrigus was ruled over by a man named Phalaris. This device was commissioned for him. He wanted to turn torture into music. His court sculpture created this unique nightmarish piece. It was a hollow sculpture of a bull with bells and whistles attached, and there was enough room for the victim to be placed inside of it. The bull would then be placed over a roaring fire, and instead of screams, it was designed to sound like the grunts of a bull. Now, some say this invention was a myth, but famed poet Cicero states that, in fact, the bull did exist and was used. This remains one of the most evil inventions in history.
Coming in at number 3, we have the tricho system. There are plenty of ways to get rid of hair in places you don't want them to be. There's waxing, shaving, electrolysis, but this one invention deserves to be mentioned just one more time before we let history completely forget it. Never do this again. The tricho system was a hair removal device that became a must-have in every salon in the 1920s, and it actually worked. It would remove the hair painlessly and effortlessly. All you had to do was sit at a mahogany desk and face a small window. When the flip was switched, there was no burning, just a slight hum from the machine. But it had some horrendous side effects. Yes, it would remove all the hair, but soon men and women would develop cancerous ulcers, carcinoma, and death. The reason? They were using X-ray technology, which is, as we know, radioactive. It would be administered to the skin for a few minutes and require anywhere between 15 to 20 treatments to be effective. X-ray technology was used for a variety of skin treatments around the time and even in the late 1800s, like for ringworm and eczema. But when the tricho machine was released, however, there was no mention of what the technology they were using was. They were just like the tricho miracle. You know, just picture like a typical 1920s ad. And the person administering it wasn't well qualified and didn't know what it was either. They just were like, flip switch, and it works. Clients were just marveled that it worked so well until it slowly burned their faces off. Of course, hindsight is 2020. How they were to know. Let's just put this embarrassing, dangerous blunder to the side, shall we?
In our second spot, we have Agent Orange. This next one we're going to talk about should kind of be remembered so that no one ever does anything so awful ever again. Agent Orange was a pesticide that was responsible for 400,000 fatalities, disabilities, and 500,000 birth defects. It was invented by plant biologist Arthur Galston in 1943. He created it as a way to help accelerate the growth of soybeans in places with a short growing season. But in large doses, it actually destroyed crops, and the US decided to take this technology and abuse it. During the War of Vietnam, they sprayed the land, and 4.5 million acres of crops in Vietnam were destroyed by Agent Orange. And any exposure the Vietnamese and US, Australian, and New Zealand soldiers had to this pesticide came with deadly consequences. It caused an abnormal amount of miscarriages, extreme birth defects, cancer, and skin conditions. Some of the land still can't even be used to this day. It's very tragic and scary.
Coming in at number 1, we have the atom bomb. If the name Robert Oppenheimer doesn't ring any bells, maybe this will. Coming in at number 1, we have the atomic bomb. See, there it is. Robert Oppenheimer invented the atomic bomb, and the first one that successfully detonated created a mushroom cloud 40,000 feet high. What people did with this new invention, however, stole an unfathomable amount of lives and opened doors for even more deadly weapons. It also led to one of the most terrifying standoffs in history during the 1960s called the Cuban Missile Crisis. The USA and Soviet Russia were caught in a standoff both with nukes pointing at each other, waiting for the other to press the big red button. Thankfully, neither did, but many countries have nukes in their arsenal, ready to strike whenever they want, and they're also still used in a lot of battles and war today. Considering how much damage was done to Nagasaki and Hiroshima due to the detonations of Fat Man and Little Boy in 1945, oh man, I hope that day never comes, and they just should get rid of them. Like, no country should just have them, because we definitely know that it will lead to the destruction of the world if they're ever used. We just should make an agreement that get rid, we forget, destroy all the ways of making them, just let's get rid. Albert Einstein was the man who prompted the USA to invent the atom bomb in order to combat the Germans in World War II. He believed the Germans were working on the bomb as well, but he found out too late that that wasn't the case, and they weren't even as far as he thought they were. He immediately regretted his decision, which is why the atomic bomb makes our list of inventions we should all forget. Just get rid of it. He's not the only one who wished it never existed. He's not the only one who wished it never existed. We should just get rid of it. Like, what?
Starting off number 10, we have the earthquake machine. Sometimes accidents happen, which is why it's important to have a team who can have your back. Tesla was known for being a risk taker and innovator, and you can't take risks without causing some damage sometimes. Comes with the territory. Tesla had patented a steam-powered mechanical oscillator that would vibrate up and down to generate electricity. He built the machine in 1893 in his laboratory in New York, and one day he thought, hey, I want to see if I can tune the oscillator to the vibration of the building I'm in. Bad idea. The whole thing almost came tumbling down. During his test, Tesla started hearing cracking as he was turning up the power, and soon all the heavy machinery started flying about the place, hence the name earthquake machine. Tesla had to take a hammer to it in order to stop it from bringing the house down. Obviously, someone had to call the police over the event, and his team had his back. The entire team kept quiet as Tesla explained that it must have been an earthquake, but no one knew that he'd accidentally turned his oscillator into an earthquake machine.
In our 9th spot today, we have the death ray, which is as terrifying as it sounds. Basically, Tesla wanted to create a weapon that could destroy entire armies from afar. It would be done by accelerating mercury isotopes to 48 times the speed of sound inside of a vacuum chamber. Then it would shoot a high velocity beam out, and the beam would cause serious damage and could be used from a great distance. Tesla even said, and I quote, "It will bring down a fleet of 10,000 enemy airplanes at a distance of 250 miles. Tesla thought that this would be great for the governments. In fact, he pitched it to multiple governments, but he was constantly shut down. Now, the Soviet Union showed some interest and a partial test was conducted, but it didn't go as Tesla hoped, which, I think is a good thing. Can you imagine people using this weapon during the wars or even nowadays? It would be very disastrous.
Number 8, the thought camera. Nikola Tesla is like the grandfather to Black Mirror. Like, he is that show. Though Tesla came up with the idea for the thought camera in 1893, he only spoke about it in 1933. He told the Kansas City Journal-Post that his mind had been stewing on the idea of a camera that could read mental imagery. Tesla said, and I quote, "I became convinced that a definite image formed in thought must by reflex action produce a corresponding image on the retina, which might be read by a suitable apparatus. Now, if it be true that a thought reflects on an image on the retina, it is a mere question of illuminating the same property in taking photographs, and then using the ordinary methods which are available to project the image on a screen. If this can be done successfully, then the objects imagined by a person would be clearly reflected on the screen as they formed, and in this way every thought of the individual could be read. Our minds would then indeed be like open books," unquote. I know sometimes I consider myself an open book, but I definitely don't want all my thoughts out there. Like, I need the filter. Like, my brain just goes everywhere, so I don't want all people seeing that stuff.
Privacy campaigners around the world are already worried about facial recognition technology. Cameras are already sophisticated enough to identify any of us when we're walking down the street, and we can no longer be sure that we truly have any privacy anywhere. The kind of facial recognition technology being trialed in China can do more than just identify you. It can decide whether you're trustworthy, and even whether you're healthy or not. Ping An, China's largest insurance company, is currently experimenting with camera technology that picks up on micro-expressions and determines whether or not a potential customer is lying.
Whoa, that's crazy. That's like listen, I'm not afraid of all of that kind of stuff, which is just my own personal beliefs, I guess. But what if it just like was wrong? You know? Like, what if it was like, you're lying, and then the whole thing escalates, but you're not lying? I think that just, you know, cold hard facts and evidence is the way to prove if somebody's lying, not a camera telling me based on their facial expression. You know? All the people who study body language are gonna be in the comments disagreeing with me.
Russian robotics company Neurobotics Lab claims to have developed a piece of artificial intelligence that can guess what type of video someone is watching purely by analyzing their brainwaves. They have to be hooked up to a machine in order for the AI to work, but it's still an amazing achievement if it's true. Not only can it deduce the content of the videos that test subjects watch, but it can also roughly reproduce a series of images similar to those seen on the screen. The idea of a machine intruding on your thoughts is a little uncomfortable, but Neurobotics Lab hopes that it will find a use in the field of medicine.
Oh, so they just made this thing with no... They're like, well, maybe one day we'll be able to use it. I guess, has there been other inventions that started out that way? Where they're like, that proved to be useful? Where they're like, we created this thing, but it doesn't really mean anything. And then now in 2021, we're like, this is the best thing ever. Thank goodness somebody created that. Does that exist? Because I like that they were like, because in my head, I was like, well, what's the point of this? Because if there's a point, I'm in. But if there's no point, then a little strange. And there's no point. But maybe one day there will be. Maybe one day there will be. I guess that's just how science works, you know? They just figure stuff out, and then that leads into another thing, and then that. So, science. Doesn't Jared say that? Science. Doesn't he have an Instagram science filter?
Legend has it that Walt Disney was cryogenically frozen after his death, with his company given instructions to wake him up in the future when technology had advanced to the point where death is more of a minor inconvenience than an absolute end. The story almost certainly isn't true, but we do know of at least one person who's been cryogenically frozen for the same reason. Chinese woman Zhan Wenlian passed away due to lung cancer in 2017, age 49, and her grieving husband had her frozen in the hopes that she could one day live again.
Whoa, that's crazy. Whoa. Did she ask to be frozen, or did he just decide that for her? 'Cause I feel like if somebody decided to freeze me with no permission, I'd be like, I prefer the warmth. That would be crazy, but my one question is, if in the future we found a way to bring people back to life who were frozen, I was gonna say, would she still have lung cancer? But I guess if we're bringing people back from the dead and from being frozen, then like we probably have solved lung cancer. I feel like we'll do cancer first and then from the dead after, but so I guess I answered my own question.
Deep fakes are videos that can take a video and allow someone else's face to be placed into that video convincingly and seamlessly. Using this method, a deepfakes expert can make it appear that you've done something that you haven't really done or said something that you haven't really said. And it's becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish a deepfake from a genuine recording. The technology works by mechanically learning the way people look, move, talk, and use the muscles of their face, and then using that knowledge to overlay the face of a subject onto a pre-existing video.
Yeah, deepfakes are crazy and kind of scary. I mean, sometimes they can be good for entertainment purposes, but yeah, like in the video, how they said they can make you appear to have said something that you didn't say. Like, that is sketchy behavior, and can be sometimes really hard. I got bamboozled by one. It was some talk show, and I can't remember who it was, but it was just somebody on a talk show, and I was like, wow, they look so different here. Yeah, because of a deepfake, not because of reality. Crazy. Anyway.
Flesh-eating robots. Right out of the pages of a horror book, the Defense Department is researching battlefield robots that power themselves by eating flesh. These flesh-eating robots are being researched at Robotic Technology. They will be programmed to collect organic matter and use it for fuel. The project, which is creepily called Energetically Autonomous Tactical Robot, or EATR, is currently underway, despite public outcry.
I'm gonna have to agree that maybe this one should be deleted. I was trying to think of some way to spin it positively and be like, well, this is pretty gruesome, but we could use it in this. But honestly, all of it, Make a car that runs off like banana peels or something like that, you know? Not passed away humans. That's horrifying. Ew, it's just gonna eat a guy? Ew, nope. I'm out. We gotta draw the line somewhere, folks.
Big Dog. Big Dog was created in 2005 and is a military robot designed for combat. Big Dog is the brainchild of Boston Dynamics, the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and the Harvard University Concorde Field Station. The robot is funded by DARPA and is intended to be used as a robotic pack mule. Big Dog can help soldiers carry things because it can go where conventional vehicles cannot go. Like a real dog, Big Dog has 4 legs so it can walk itself across rough terrain.
Okay, I don't mind that one, except the little leggies are very creepy and very disturbing. So I think that the legs of that thing should be deleted and just different and less horrifying. But just the idea of the invention, I mean, I guess it makes sense. It's helping the soldiers carry stuff and whatever. I mean, unless it's, I don't know. I don't know anything about soldier life. But yeah, those legs, they gotta go. That's it. That's those legs were very creepy. It looked like that creature that's like all black with a white face. You know, people on TikTok or that creature. I don't know what it's called. I don't even know if it has a name. But you know, there's that person who it's like this with a white mask face. You know. Anyway.